Hello everyone, I'm CoolGuy, welcome back, and today let's go over the exotic precision hand cannon Malfeasance, and spoiler alert, shocker, it's one of my favorite weapons in the game. I'll explain why throughout the review. Malfeasance is obtained through Gambit, the Ascended Primeval servitor has a spawn. Currently it has a really low chance at spawning, but Bungie is adjusting those chances here in a couple weeks. During the third week of the curse cycle, or full curse week, it's going to have the same chance at spawning as any other Primeval. When not in full curse week, the drop rate is going to be upped on him. Really important changes, those start on October 30th, because getting him to spawn is half the battle, because not only do you need him to spawn, but you also need to defeat him. Once you do, here are your quest steps. Number 1 is to talk to the Drifter at the tower. Number 2 is to defeat 25 taken yellow bar enemies. Number 3, complete a special, the Corrupted Strike at 580 power. Number 4, deposit motes and win matches in Gambit. And in all, it's around 400 motes, 420, something like that. And you have to win 10 matches. You also need not to die when you're holding your mote, so it sets your progress back greatly if you die while holding your mote, so it's best to bank 5 or 10 at a time, get that progress steadily going, and the last step is to defeat 25 opposing guardians in Gambit, and either team wipe them once as an invader or have one of your allies do it 3 times. Once you complete it, you're rewarded Malfeasance. It's a 180 RPM hand cannon. The perks that make up the stats of this hand cannon are corkscrew rifling, slight increase to range, stability, and handling, extended mag, great increase to magazine, but greatly decreases reload, and then heavy grip, weighted for recoil control. We're gonna bring that up in a little bit. This increases your stability and decreases your handling speed. So all those perks make up the end result of these stats right here. We have a range of 50, stability of 96, handling of 32, reload of 64, aim assist stat of 50, recoil direction stat of 98, and a magazine of 15. Its 2 perks are Taken Predator, bonus damage against taken enemies and Gambit invaders, and then Explosive Shadow, shoot tainted slugs that burrow into the enemy. Stacking enough slugs causes them to explode. Let's start off with Taken Predator. The bonus damage is decent, I can feel it can be a lot better, and apparently Bungie feels the same way. On October 30th, a big day, they're increasing the viability of Malfeasance in PvE and in Gambit activities. That's a really good call, because this change actually made me really hesitant to do the review right now. We'll revisit the weapon later. Because being that this is an exotic, it has to have better viability in PvE, especially when it states that it's going to be great against a certain PvE type of enemy. Because in PvE, it needs to be good enough to take the Sleeper out of my hands, take the Whisper, and some activities take the Risk Runner, Ace of Spades, and so on. I'm eager to see what they do with it. As it currently sits, it's decent against yellow bar enemies and bosses, and of course trash mobs, what isn't? It has 15 rounds. You pile up shots and get Explosive Shadow going. After 5 hits, those tainted slugs start exploding and going off. So with those yellow bars and bosses, generally you're using a sleeper or a special weapon like a shotgun. That's why this buff is important to the weapon, because it's a kinetic exotic. You would assume that if you put on a kinetic exotic, it's going to be your workhorse, it's going to be your main. It needs to be really good, or at least make it its niche aspect. In this weapon's case, taken enemies, it needs to do a lot better than it is currently. And a lot of players say that this is kind of Thorn-esque, but I honestly don't think of it like that. I personally believe it reminds me of Outbreak Prime. It's one of my favorite weapons in Destiny 1. But again, overall, as it currently stands, it's decent. It's borderline underwhelming though. It has its moments, but this weapon's fate is going to fall into Bungie's hands. A few tweaks here or there go a long way. They could take a near worthless weapon like Graviton Lance and make it one of the best PvE and PvP weapons in the entire game. That's how this weapon is going to go down, and I believe that they're really looking at it long term, because rarely do they touch something twice, and if they do it a second time, it's much later on down the line. So it's nice to see that they already see the kind of issue with it and they're ready to buff it. In Gambit, to an invader, it does 77 to the head and 52 to the body, and that's awesome, it's great, but you would think that it would be an absolute powerhouse in there. You have taken enemies, you do bonus damage to those invaders, but the real issue is how Gambit's being played. You have long range engagements involving the Sleeper Sim, and you wouldn't really know how special this weapon could be because you don't really get a chance to use it, if that makes sense. Now, I have a feeling that Sleeper's going to be running the show for a little bit. It's going to get nerfed, right? They talked about the ammo going down and the aim assist, but I think players are just going to move to tracking rockets and snipers, which again, it's going to be a long-range game. So in every single account in PvE, we're going to have to kind of put on hold until we see what they do. Before we get into the PvP section, we need to talk about Heavy Grip. Heavy Grip is a blessing and a curse. Good stability, bad handling. It feels very heavy in your hands, so heavy, I was like, man, this thing kind of feels like a 110 at times. And would you look at that? Now, I do have this weapon adjusted on how I like to run my MK44 Duke, but that concept kind of still remains. It kind of handles like a 110, but of course performs like a 180. You can help some of that with some hand cannon dexterity, but to be completely honest, the handling doesn't bother me that much. It is what it is, and it still performs, although some players might not like that. In PvP, it does 57 to the head and 39 to the body. It's a 2 headshot, 2 body shot kill, a relaxed 1 second TTK. Its max distance that it does 57 to the head is 28.5 meters, and if you refer to my previous video on how flinch is working in Destiny 2, you can achieve that TTK fairly consistently. But here's the deal with this weapon, and here's why it's one of my favorite weapons in the game, and I stand by that, and it also appears the weapon's just going to be getting better come October 30th. In a couple days of having this weapon, I had 8 or 10 Wii Rans with it. I started and completed my Luna's Howl quest last week, and I used Malfeasance in comp. I got to Fable 2100 without losing a game, 26 or so win streak, using Malfeasance. There are 3 important factors to Malfeasance in PvP for me. Number 1 is the way the Explosive Shadow perk works in PvP. Yes, it has a 28.5 meter effective range, but that extends to 43.5 with this perk, so it adds 15 meters. It pretty much lets you have a 5-shot kill anywhere, because after 5 shots, they explode and it does 20 apiece for each slug that was inserted. We're all human, we all miss shots, it's gonna happen, so that's important. It lets you know as a player that you need to land 5 shots anywhere and they're down. And when you're doing this, you need to be looking for 19s and 20s to the body, because if you decide to challenge and they're far away, pay attention to that body damage. If it's 19 or above, you're in the green light. And you're really not going to be too far out of range most of the time because you're using a hand cannon and you shouldn't and wouldn't be looking down and challenging those long lanes, right? Number 2, I'm a console player. So there's a huge shift, a huge difference in PC and console. On console, we have bloom really bad. 180 hand cannons have little to no bloom, meaning that where you aim is where your bullet is going. That's important. Now, I can speak universally here. Now, sure, this upcoming statement is not totally true because there's hundreds of thousands of players of this game, but for the most part, you don't see 10 paces. You don't see better devils too much anymore. You don't see most other hand cannons being used on console. You see a lot of pulses, and when you do see those hand cannons, it's mostly Trust, Luna's Howl, West's Sunfall. A lot of precision hand cannons due to their accuracy. Now, you do see Ace of Spades a little bit on console, but nowhere near as much as you see on PC. And when you see it on console, players are using it because Ace doesn't have that many issues. It's because of its range. And when I say range, I'm not talking about damage fall off. I mean that the range is so high, it doesn't have near as many issues as far as accuracy as any other hand cannon. But you see Trust and company a lot more than you see any other hand cannon type. From what I've seen personally in the Crucible, let me know down in the comment section. Landing shots where you aim at is important, especially for us console players. And number 3, the biggest thing about Malfeasance. I'm a stat guy. I like looking at the inner workings of a weapon, looking at perk combos, ways to use gear. When you look at Malfeasance, no matter if you're on PC or console, you cannot deny the stability of 96 and the magazine of 15. It's undeniable. Those 2 things together really make this weapon on a core level. You combine that with a 5-tap from basically anywhere, it shoots straight, and when it's you versus another player, on that core stat level, Malfeasance is elite. I don't think that you can argue that. Now, there is an argument of, well, I could just use my Trust, I could do that with the Ace of Spades, but there are over 350, 400 weapons in this game, counting shotgun snipers. Only one of them has more stability than Malfeasance, and that's the Graviton Lance, but the Graviton Lance has that perk that makes it kick like a mule. Aside from that, it's the most stable weapon in the game. That's how I look at it, and as I said earlier, I've had a lot of Wii Rans. I use it exclusively in comp in the first part of the Luna's Howl quest. And I was using Malfeasance to get a really good feel for 180s before I get the Luna's Howl. It worked for me, and it works really well for me. So this is just my personal opinion, review of the weapon, and we're probably going to revisit this video in a couple weeks when it gets its buff. It's one of those exotics that you're going to love or you're going to hate. Currently in PvE, it's not the best option, but it could be. It has current issues in PvE, and most of those issues arise from the weapon warranting usage in a player's exotic slot, especially in the kinetic category. As it sits, there are way better options, and we're just gonna have to wait and see what Bungie does with it. It could be a game changer, you never know. For PvP, the high stability and precision frame with 15 rounds with the 5-tap within your range works for me. It's very, very good. On a base statistical level, this hand cannon is out of this world good. And that shows up in your average day-to-day gunfight. That's why it's one of my favorites. Thank you guys for watching. Let me know down in the comment section what you guys think of Malfeasance. And until the next one, I am CoolGuy.
I would tear out a Vex heart with my teeth. I would sear the Cabal with my burning light, challenge the fallen Kells to personal combat and scatter them.